But seriously, I do not consider that woman is inferior to man, as she has huge responsibilities and a definite purpose in life.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Outing History with me, Lucas Adam. Today we're going to be talking about Mr. Peter Alexander, a musician, a trans man, a Mr. Steal Your Girl. My friend recently sent me this video, this short little 1 minute and some change clip of an interview of a trans man, Peter Alexander, from 1930s in New Zealand. And I was like, oh yeah, I came across this video a couple years ago. Let me look into it. And I couldn't find anything else about him. All I could find was this little video until I came across this newspaper article that his mother-in-law put out on him to basically tear him down. But adversely, because of her article, we now know that he was the most suave man to ever exist. Interviewed in New Zealand in 1937, Peter talks about his male side and personality becoming dominant, and after seeking professional help, he decided to be done with dresses.
Meet Peter Alexander. This extraordinary character astounded the world when the announcement was blazoned forth. Mavis Higgins the girl had become Peter Alexander the man. Where were you born, Mr. Alexander?
A little place called Palmerston North in New Zealand. I was born and educated as a girl, but men's sports have always appealed to me particularly. I'm very fond of golf, very keen on swimming, and tennis, of course. In 1927, I was a schoolgirl champion. But then I decided to give it up after that, as I thought I had a decided advantage over my opponents. As the years passed on, it became very evident that the male side and the male personality was becoming dominant. So after seeking medical advice, I decided to cast aside women's clothing for those of a male. Although I no longer use lipstick and powder, which would be rather ridiculous when one has to shave every day, I don't blame the modern girl for using it, and it sometimes makes them appear really more beautiful than they are. But seriously, I do not consider that woman is inferior to man, as she has huge responsibilities and a definite purpose in life. I left New Zealand because of the publicity which followed me wherever I went, and I hope to go to London at a later date, and when I return to settle down and marry here and continue with my musical career. And finally, I have one advantage over you other chappies, and that is I know both sides to every little Audrey story.
So I don't know exactly when this interview was done, but within the same year, this article is already put out. And to be fair, I don't know if the woman in this video is Peter's wife at the time. Who I'm going to be talking about in this video, he had a lot of girlfriends reportedly. Hence the title I'm giving him, Mr. Steal Your Girl. But this newspaper article is from November 20th, 1937. And let me tell you, it is a true soap opera. If you're somebody who's had to come out, you might have had the person that you're confiding in have a little woe is me moment, a little this hurts me more than you kind of reaction. And this newspaper is exactly that energy. So, to clear a few things up, the name of Peter's wife and mother-in-law are never mentioned. Neither is the ex-fiance that's talked about in this article. So I'm just kind of gonna refer to these individuals as Peter's mother-in-law, and then her daughter as Peter's wife, or Miss Alexander. So I'm sorry, this article is, I love this article. I love it. I mean, I hate it because it came out of a place of anger and trying to basically put a hit out on this man, but it just made him, I'm sorry, okay, anyways. So, in November of 1937, a hysterical mother posted an article in Smith's Weekly begging readers to help her get her daughter back. This mother is Peter Alexander's mother-in-law. I'm not going to read directly from the article in the voice that I heard when I was reading this. Granted, this is purely just my own interpretation of it. broken-hearted Sydney mother has made a pathetic appeal to Smith's Weekly to try to get back her daughter, who she says left her home intending to marry the now notorious New Zealand man-woman. "I will never rest," states the anxious mother, "until my girl is back with me again. The marriage she talks about is an impossible match, but my poor, foolish girl does not seem to know it. She has become infatuated, and nothing I can do or say will persuade her to return home again. As the police whom I call are powerless to act, perhaps Smith's Weekly can do something for me. My girl has broken off her engagement with a good boy, whom she was to marry early in the new year. She gave no reason for giving back the ring, but no reason is all too plain now. She has fallen madly in love with a person from New Zealand who is 24 years of age and a dance band musician. She says she is going to marry him. The person whom she wants to marry is none other than Peter Alexander, the so-called man-woman from New Zealand." I have no idea what this accent is I'm doing. I'm just going with it. "It is a terrible calamity, and I don't know what to do. My daughter is an attractive girl, popular with everyone she's met. She had been engaged for some time to marry a responsible, steady young man who was devoted to her. Then along came this so-called man-woman, medical wonder, Peter Alexander. That was the end of everything. Their meeting can result only in sorrow." I love this. I'm eating this up. "Now they have run away together, and my girl has thrown over her good position to go with Peter Alexander, formerly dead name here, but we respect the dead here." "So unreal. My daughter states that this Macquarie Street specialist says he will operate on Alexander and turn her or him into a man so that they can marry. This whole thing seems so unreal, but my girl believes it. I want Alexander sent back to New Zealand. Can Smith's Weekly do something for me?" I love that because she didn't give her name in this article, she's only going to be referred to as Peter's mother-in-law. She's definitely rolling in her grave, poor dear. Now, page 2 is where we learn how Peter and his soon-to-be wife met each other. And it is where we learn just how much of a little devil this man was. So he personally invited Miss Alexander to watch him play and watch him be titled Voice of the Year at the Hoyt's Circuit Singing. It's a venue for music. When Miss Alexander told her mother about the invitation, her mom thought it was a bad idea and had her, at the time fiance, her soon-to-be ex-fiance, go with her because she was like, "I've read about this man and I think he's no good. Take your husband with him." Miss Alexander and her ex-fiance went to go see Peter play. And I can only imagine that her ex-fiance's presence was that equal to like the third wheel. Peter and this young lady immediately began seeing each other secretly. And only like a few days later, she gave the ring back to her ex-fiance and she said, "I'm Peter's girl now, sorry." So, the article includes phrases from the ex-fiance, and to me, it seemed like he paid little attention to Miss Alexander and didn't take her very serious. He very much gives me, she was just on her period kind of energy, and this is why she didn't want to marry me. Like, literally, he literally says, okay, he told the newspaper he couldn't think of a reason as to why she gave the ring back, and told the worried mother, "It's all right, it'll blow over later. She's in a difficult mood is all." The article then continues by Peter's mother-in-law saying that once her daughter's boyfriend stopped calling the house and her daughter started to stay out late or leave on mornings, she knew she didn't have work. Then is when she knew something was up. So one night, some reporters showed up at the house and said, "We understand Peter Alexander, the boy girl from New Zealand, had been there. Do you know where we can find him? A taxi was seen bringing him here some time ago." So the mom told reporters she has no idea what they're talking about. So once the reporters left, the daughter came out of her room and told her mother that she had been indeed seeing Peter. She went on to say, "I don't believe them. Peter must be a man or he wouldn't be allowed to go around dressed up as a man. He says he has a permit from the New Zealand police which provides it as a genuine case." Anyway, I believe Peter no matter what they say. The mother put her arms around her daughter and called her a silly girl. Miss Alexander then walked off into her room. Her mother followed her, and Miss Alexander, staying true to her feelings for Peter, said, "I love him and we're getting married." The mother begged her to say that it wasn't true. "I love him and I'm going to marry him. He will get a doctor to say he is a man and then everything will be all right. All the world seems to be against him, but I am not because I love him." That shit was beautiful. I thought that shit was so beautiful when I first read that. And then her mother continued to plead against their love and demanded that they stop seeing each other and that she stops talking to him. And that she should marry the man who loves her. Who blamed their breakup on her period. What the fuck ever. Okay, whatever, sir. And then Miss Alexander broke down and crying. The newspaper continues to say that Miss Alexander, the daughter, left home Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. sharp. And knowing her daughter did not have work, she rang all around town trying to find her. They called hospitals to see if she had been in an accident or something, just completely refusing to accept that her daughter is with Peter. Once all the leads left her astray, she called the police. Before the police showed up, the phone rang, and it was her daughter claiming that Peter needs her, and I'm assuming they had some conversation about her mother meeting Peter, because the article just kind of jumps to Miss Alexander and Peter being in the mother's house, and it mentions that Peter was in a skirt and it was a hopeful attempt not to offend his mother-in-law. However, the mother, according to the article, the mother was not offended that he would dress as a man. So then he, put back on his regular attire. But that was very considerate of him to try to appease the mother. I understand that you may perceive me as a woman, so I'll just dress as a woman, but it didn't bother her. But I don't know. Okay, yeah. So according to the article though, did not bother her, so then he changed into wearing men's clothes. And then the article says plainclothed men showed up to the house that night. I'm assuming those were the police that she called earlier. So the following night, 2 CIB detectives arrived at the doorsteps of the mother-in-law. The detective said that the daughter was 21 years of age, she could act how she liked, and since it was only a serious offense for a man to dress as a woman, not as a woman to dress as a man, there's nothing they can do. Yay, misogyny for the win? I don't know. So, sometimes homophobia does help you out. There's a big shoe. We have to wear special shoes at my job, and there's a big shoe stealing fiasco going on. And I wrote gay in big metallic letters on my shoes. Have not been touched since. Sometimes homophobia helps us. Again, there's nothing they can do. They're basically saying your daughter's a grown-ass adult. We can't tell her not who to date, kind of. And once again, since it's only illegal for, AMAB people to dress as a woman and not for AFAB people to dress as a man, nothing we can do. They did ask for Peter's address. Now, throughout this article, there was a big focus on what is Peter's address. Thankfully, the address was never found out because, they didn't want that address for anything good. So yeah, she, thankfully, refused to give them Peter's address. And then the detectives left. Miss Alexander packed some clothes and left with Peter. As he was parked behind the garden the whole time, Miss Alexander kept distant from her mother after this. Her mother assumed this was to protect Peter. Sorry, I know this kind of jumps around a lot. I don't have exact time frames in the article. They weren't super clear. I'm assuming it's just kind of day by day or day, the night, and another day. But this was the only article I could find or anything about him, so that's all I got to go off of. So then the article continues to talk about like rumors that they've heard about Peter since they interviewed the mother. And the rumors are basically like, Peter kind of like stayed out of Dodge as far as like media coverage goes. But then an anonymous tip came in to the newspapers that he was seen in a doctor's office waiting room. And the newspaper, in an attempt to try to get more information about this, called the doctor's office, and they did get a hold of the doctor. However, thankfully, may this doctor be resting in ever heavenly peace, he was such a smartass to them. And he's just great fucking people in history that are just amazing. First, he did say on a matter of ethics, he could not share information about his patient, which is like, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness for a good doctor in the 30s. Who knew? And then he basically said like, oh, like he started toying with them. Like he was like, oh, you're right, he is getting surgery soon, but he might just be getting his tonsils out though. That could just be the surgery he's getting. Facetiously playing with them, and I love it. So shout out to the doctor. And then the article ends on interviewing like the ex-fiance. He then continues to say that he hasn't seen her since she gave the ring back, and that he called her crazy. And then he says that he is willing to marry and wants to marry her right away. But then he goes to say how all of the women at the music festival were in a great fuss to dance with him, and they were falling all over each other, and how they thought it was an honor to dance with him. And he then ends by saying the whole thing is most amazing. I don't know what to make of it. New Zealand doctors say that she is a woman and yet she dresses as a man and claims to be one. The article then ends by the mother stating that she intends to make inquiries about rumors that she's heard about Peter having another engagement in New Zealand. She does say that this rumor was a lie, but there's also quotation marks around the lie, so I'm not sure that she believes it, and we don't really know if it was a lie or not. And that's the history of Peter Alexander, the smooth-talking, well-dressed, talented gentleman who would indeed steal your girl. There is one last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this video up. So, in the article, Peter mentions, or Miss Alexander mentions that Peter has a card basically saying that, like, he's a man and he's allowed to, like, present as a man, which I find very interesting because at the same time in history, Magnus Hirschfeld, who was a doctor in Germany, who had the, what was it, Institute for Sexuality or something like that, and he was also working with the police there, he was working with the police there to hand out cards to trans people, basically saying like for medical reasons, this person is allowed to cross-dress or dress as the opposite sex. And it's really interesting because like now, like, I really want to know what other countries, had these doctors like writing like basically like permission slips to break like cross-dressing laws, to break masquerading laws, for their medical well-being. And like I really like want to know like if we didn't have fucking Nazis making Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute the first book burning, like what else, like how much further in like queer history and like trans history would we be if like, or in the medical field, I guess, and like we didn't have these people like erasing this history. Like I don't know, like it just makes me like I really want to find out like what other places kind of like had this like early stages of like welcoming and accepting and understanding like genderqueer people. Like that's really fucking cool. Well, in like the colonized, like kind of like post-colonization like countries, right? Thank you for outing history with me. And if you saw my last video and you left a comment, thank you. They were all so nice comments. I didn't think I'd get one view, let alone I think it's almost at like 400 now and like 11 or so comments, and they're all so nice. So thank you so much. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. I talk about how Tag wrapped Jesse Helm's house in a large condom, and it's very great. And yeah, thank you for joining me, and happy Halloween.